Вітаю. Алло, дай право на запись.
Записываем.
Hello, extremers. Today we meet here with Lewis Pugh, the first United Nations patron of the oceans. He is best known for swimming in vulnerable ecosystems to draw attention to their plight. In 2007, he swam across the North Pole and did a lot of other crazy things in swimming. And today we will try to understand, to ask him why does he do it and how does he do it. So Lewis, welcome to our chat. Hi, Lewis.
How are you?
How are you today? Yeah, I'm well. So you are in South Africa now, yes?
Yes, I'm in Cape Town.
In Cape Town.
Yeah.
What is the weather in Cape Town today?
Well, it's still summer, but today it is absolutely horrible. Raining. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So autumn is nearby, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
So Lewis, just, it's hard to imagine what you are doing. And the first question which I always want to ask is, why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
What pushes you to challenge your limits again and again?
Obviously, I love swimming. So I don't think you could do it unless you love swimming. I've been swimming now for 35 years. And swimming has taken me to some of the most beautiful parts of the world. So there's the joy of swimming, and I hope to swim until my last day on Earth. But I now use swimming to carry a message about the health of our planet. And so I swim specifically now to talk about what we can do to help protect our planet. So if there's no message, there's no swim. It's that simple now.
Yeah, because just to love swimming is not enough to do your crazy challenges. You swim in such a horrible conditions. So very few of normal people could repeat it.
Well, you say crazy challenges, I think I'm normal. I think the rest of the world is crazy. When you go high up into the Arctic, or you go down to Antarctica, or you go to some of the places I've been with the coral reefs in the world, and you see the way they have changed, and they have changed so much in such a short period of time to not do anything. Those are the people who are crazy. So, but yes, these swims are extreme. When you swim across the North Pole, the conditions are unimaginable, and even worse when you go down to Antarctica. So when I swam across the North Pole, the water was minus 1.7 degrees centigrade. So, I don't have to tell Russian people about what cold water is like. Russians are the champions. The Russians and the Finns are champions at cold water. But so a lot of people have swum at 0 degrees or a little bit warmer than 0 degrees. But when you go down below zero, things change. I mean, water is an incredible substance. I mean, if you think about it, between 0 degrees and 100 degrees, it's a liquid.
Yeah.
Above 100, it becomes a gas. But below zero, with fresh water, it becomes a solid. So there's actually a tipping point at which water actually changes completely. And certainly when you're swimming in water which is below zero, so when I swam across the North Pole, it was minus 1.7. And you think, okay, what's the difference between 0 and minus 1.7? It's huge. It's a difference between climbing a huge mountain and climbing K2 in winter. That's how big it is. And then when I swam down in the Ross Sea in Antarctica, the water was minus 1.7 again, but the air temperature was minus 27. I mean, that type of conditions, when you pull your hand out the water and that wind,
it froze.
It's so extreme. I'll never ever forget it, because we arrived in the Ross Sea. And to arrive in the Ross Sea, it is just the most beautiful place in the world. I mean, I want you to imagine, you've sailed from New Zealand at 40 degrees south, 40 to 50 to 60 to 70, and then you see these enormous great mountains in Antarctica. And then eventually, if you carry on sailing to 78 degrees south, you see this massive great wall of ice, and that's the Ross ice shelf. And there's no water further south. It's then land further south. And the animals that live there, the emperor penguins, the beautiful big penguins with a white chest and a gold bow tie, and humpback whales and leopard seals, you know, this is their world, and they are very suitably adapted to that world. But when I was there, I remember asking my wife just to get in a small boat and go along where I was going to swim and make sure that there were no animals in the water. And I watched as she got lowered in a small boat off the ship down into the water, and a wave hit the side of the boat and came up, and the water then hit her as ice. So instantaneously, it was so cold that water, when it came up into the air, turned to ice. So those conditions are the most extreme I've ever swum in, the most dangerous, the most frightening.
Really? How do you choose the new destinations? How do you choose the places to swim next?
Yeah, you know, I'm always thinking, you know, where is it that I can next do a swim? But I don't start with that. I start with the message. So what is the message I'm trying to get across? And how can I then find a swim and a location to do the swim to carry the message? So, for example, the Ross Sea, let me give you an example of the Ross Sea. So Antarctica is an amazing place. I mean, it's truly amazing. But the problem with Antarctica is nobody lives there other than a few scientists, okay? But it's right on the edge now of all the changes which are occurring in the world because of climate change and overfishing. And it's the last true wilderness area left on this earth. And under international law, 25 countries govern Antarctica, okay? And they all wanted to protect it except 2 countries. So for 17 years, the negotiations had been going on to try and protect the area of the Ross Sea. And they'd gone on and on and on, but 2 countries still needed persuading. And under international law, they've all got to agree it. And the 2 countries were Russia and China. So I thought to myself, you know, how can I carry a message to Moscow about something which is happening 15,000 kilometers away down in the southern hemisphere in another part of the world? How can you do that? And what's interesting is that Antarctica was discovered by a Russian. It was discovered by, you know, Admiral Bellinghausen, and in 1820. And so all I was thinking about was, okay, do I go do a swim in Russia? Do I do a swim in the Arctic? You know, how do you take this message? And then I met Slava Fetisov. You know, everybody in Russia's heard of Slava Fetisov, you know, great ice hockey legend. And I decided to go, and he said, go and do a swim in the Ross Sea, get the imagery, come to Russia, and I will take you to meet the politicians. So that's what I did. And, you know, the footage was amazing. I went there, and 2 years later, China then signed the deal, and then shortly afterwards, Russia agreed it. And that protected area...
So they signed the deal?
Yes, so Russia signed the deal. So that protected area down in Antarctica is the size of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, all put together. It's 1.5 million square kilometers. And nothing gave me greater joy. So I'm always thinking, where can I do a swim to carry a message and then get it straight to the political decision makers? How do you do that? So you've got to be creative. You've got to be always thinking about, you know, interesting places to swim.
So it looks like, you know, you can make it politics being no politician. Yeah. It's so you can be a subject, not subject, but, you know, the someone who make a big change in the big world, being just a single person. It's
yes, you know,
it's a big,
for me,
big responsibility. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, for me, this is about justice. This is about justice between ourselves and the animal kingdom. You know, the oceans, the Secretary General of the United Nations, he appointed me as a patron of the oceans, the United Nations patron of the oceans. And he said something simple to me. He said, Lewis, all I want you to do is I want you to be a voice for the ocean. I want you to,
Voice.
yes, just be a voice for the ocean. I want you to be a voice for all the magnificent animals that live in our ocean, because they don't sit in parliament. So I want you to be a voice for the polar bear. I want you to be a voice for dolphins. I want you to be a voice for fish. I want you to be a voice for penguins, all these magnificent animals. And that's what I try to do. It's share a message in not in a political way. You know, you can't go to Moscow and bully President Putin or bully Sergei Ivanov or Sergei Shoigu. You can't bully them into protecting an area. What you have to do is you have to go to this place and show them how magnificent it is, and then share with them the science about how important it is to protect, and explain to them why it's also in Russia's national interest to protect the place. That's what you've got to do. And if you do that in a way which is persuasive and not aggressive, but warm, and let's build bridges, let's work together, then they will listen. Then they will listen.
Great. So you have a message. You repeat it again and again. Could you figure it out shortly? What is your message? So very short, just in one phrase, if it's possible.
I want, you know, I explained earlier that I've been swimming now for 35 years. I've seen our oceans change. I've seen them change very, very quickly. So when I did my first swim in the Arctic, when I was training to swim across the North Pole, I trained on an island called Svalbard. And when I started my training there, the sea temperature was 3 degrees. I went back there a few years ago, the same time of year, same place. The water was no longer 3 degrees. It's now 10 degrees centigrade. 10. So it had gone from 3 degrees to 10 degrees in just 12 years. So my message to the world is very, very simple. Our planet is changing. It's changing incredibly quickly. And I want people to wake up every single morning and ask themselves, how can I help protect and save this beautiful planet? And I want not only individuals like you and me, swim clubs, but I want countries to think about it. I want businesses to think about it. I want everybody to think about it. What can I do today to help make the world a better place and a safer place?
Sounds great. So Lewis, maybe you can give some advice to us. So we are X-Waters, we have, I guess, near 20,000 swimmers in our community. Yeah. And so we have some media coverage, some social media resources. So we have some resource to do something. What do you think? What could we at X-Waters do for the oceans to help translate this message, or maybe some other message, but to help to save our planet?
Yeah. You know, the people who use the ocean, so I'm talking about swimmers, kayakers, windsurfers, sailors, fishermen, you know, all of us who use the ocean on a daily basis and who care about the ocean, we've got to become a voice for the ocean. All of us, we need to be custodians, we need to be guardians of the ocean. We should be protecting the oceans to ensure that future generations are able to enjoy it the way that we enjoy it. So I think that's my simple message, is that all these people who are swimming in Russia, we all need to be a voice for the ocean. We all need to care about the ocean, and all of us can do very, very simple things, which together, collectively, not only protect the beautiful rivers and lakes and waters around Russia, but also make a big impact on the world. One thing that I'm always so surprised about, because, you know, I come to Russia now at least 3-4 times a year. And it never ceases to amaze me how big Russia is. Russia, I don't have to tell you, but Russia is twice as big as the second biggest country in the world, which is Canada.
Yeah.
And so there's no ways, and if you think about all the problems, you know, pollution, climate change, overfishing, all these type of things, these can't be solved by one nation. They can't be solved by one group of people. They require everybody to work together, and we cannot protect the planet without Russia, period. We need Russia's leadership. And leadership always starts, you know, from the bottom. It starts with ordinary people saying, we want to protect this.
Yeah, it doesn't look so easy, but so it's not just a single step. Yeah, it's like a process. It's a way which maybe we have to change our habits, our everyday, you know, behavior. So it's maybe the only one way to change something globally there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember listening to Bill Gates speaking a few days ago. So now Bill Gates is talking about climate change in a very meaningful way, and he's just written a book, and he said this is the single biggest problem which mankind has ever faced.
Yeah.
Single biggest problem. It's complex, so all these things are interrelated and interlinked. But he said those people who say it can't be solved are wrong. It can be solved, but it's going to require a lot of change and in a short period of time. And I'm sure he's right on that.
So, Lewis, in your just everyday living, do you do something special? Maybe use only, I don't know, electric car, or just a bicycle, or maybe you don't eat meat. I don't know. Just what do you do in your everyday living to save the ocean, if any?
Yeah, I mean, so my whole life is about trying to protect the oceans. I've got a very, very small car. I eat very little meat. I don't eat fish. The reason why I don't
eat fish?
No, I don't eat fish. And people say, well, why don't you eat fish? Well, really, they are so overfished, and the oceans are so badly overfished. It would sound, I feel like I would be a hypocrite if I were eating fish now. And then I travel very little, you know, and thanks to coronavirus, very few people are traveling. But I try to get my message out, you know, on the internet, giving talks like this and being interviewed. Yeah, those are some of the things which I do. But I do a lot of talks now, and I think that's the best thing that I can do, which is being an advocate for the oceans.
Okay, Lewis, could we talk a little bit about your swimming as well? About your preparation. So you did a lot of swims in very specific conditions. For example, at Everest, it was, it's like 3,500 meters, latitude, above sea level, and Everest.
Yes, so I swam in a lake which was 5,200 meters above
5,000.
5,200, yeah.
How did you adapt to it? It's really high. I've been at similar latitude, but it's hard to move.
It's very hard.
Not just to swim. How did you adopt? How did you prepare for it?
So I went to South America, into the Andes, and I spent 3 weeks there training at very, very high altitude in a lake in Argentina, and then I went to Mount Everest, and we walked up very, very slowly. So we had a lot of adaptation. But here's the interesting thing: I tried to do the swim across the lake, and the first time I tried it, I thought I was going to drown. I just couldn't breathe. I was gasping for air. And so we had to completely change the way I was swimming. And the leader of the expedition, he took me aside and he said, "Lewis, you've got to you have to completely change the way you are swimming, otherwise you will drown in this lake." And so instead of swimming crawl, I actually swam at breaststroke so I could breathe whenever I want to. And the other thing was, normally I swim really fast to try and generate the heat. He said, no. On this swim, you've actually got to swim really, really slowly. And the reason for that is to preserve the oxygen. If you try and swim really fast on Everest, you will drown. It's that simple. But the last thing he told me was the most important. I remember him standing by the side of the lake before I was about to dive in and go for it. And he said, Lewis, he pointed up to Mount Everest and he said, you cannot bully Mount Everest. He said, Lewis, you've got to swim with real humility. Real humility. So I got into the lake and I just swam very, very slow breaststroke, and just every time I took a breath, trying to take as much oxygen as possible. It's very, very different climbing up Everest and swimming on Everest. When you're climbing, you can stop. If you're swimming, you stop, you're going to get cold very, very quickly. The water in the lake was 2 degrees centigrade. You're going to get cold really, really quickly. And so there's this tension where you've got to swim slowly, so you preserve the oxygen, but you've got to swim fast enough that you're still able to maintain enough heat. So I swam the kilometer, and I think it took me around about 23 minutes to complete. I got out the other side. I was frozen cold. Yeah.
How did you recover after it?
We had taken a heater. So, everything on Mount Everest, you have to carry it. And so the team was an enormous team of Nepalese Sherpas, and they carried this like heating device. And as soon as I got out of the water into a tent, they heated up the tent. After about 15, 20 minutes, that tent was boiling hot, and that's the way I recovered. And they brought my core body temperature up nice and quickly.
Who is your team? Is it the same team on all the challenge, or you just collect each time the new one?
Yeah, I collect each time, and I'm looking for specific things. I'm also, not only am I looking for specific skills. So, for example, you need a doctor, you need a cameraman, you need a videographer, you need somebody who's got a kayak next to you, or you need somebody who's going to drive a boat. So you need those skills. Most importantly, I'm looking for a type of personality. Yeah. So I'm looking for people who have passion. What we're doing, we're trying to protect the planet. Let's give this a good go. And I look for a specific type of personality. If I can take you through a range of personalities, on the most extreme left, you get pessimistic people. Over here, you get cynical people. In the middle, you get realists. Over here, you get optimists. And right over here, you get your daydreamers. So the daydreamers are the people who say, oh, Lewis, don't worry. Dive into the freezing cold water. If we've got any problems, we can sort it out in the water. No. And you also don't want to have pessimistic and cynical people who look at everything and everything is gray. So I look for people over here. I look for people who are realistic optimists. People who say, Lewis, let's give this a good go because the reason why we're doing it is really important. And then lastly, I look for a standard. I talk about an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. That everything we do in the team, we do to the very, very best of our ability, because our lives depend upon it. It's not just me in the water. When you see these swims, it's just all you see is me, but there's often a cameraman in the water. There's a videographer in the water. There may be somebody flying a drone in very windy conditions. All our lives depend upon excellence. And so I always look for that. So the whole team, I'm preparing now for a very, very big expedition. The team will be about 10 people. But when I did the North Pole swim, that team was enormous. Everybody who was involved, that was about 29 people. It's a lot of people.
So there are expensive things. May I ask who pays your bills for such expeditions?
Yeah. No,
your money or sponsors, or what is the economy?
So these swims are incredibly expensive. And normally the money comes from 3 sources. So I look for commercial sponsors. So for example, Speedo sponsor me. other commercial sponsors, and probably about 40% of the expenses are paid by commercial sponsors. Then there are some foundations. So these are environmental organizations who want me to share my message about protecting the oceans. They probably pay about 40%. The other 20% I end up paying. I've never ever in 35 years been able to cover all my expenses. Because these expeditions are incredibly expensive. Yeah.
You are not a professional swimmer. Yeah, you have some regular job or some other sources. Yeah.
Well, so
just interesting. How is your life?
How's my life?
Yeah.
So my life is environmental work. So I started out as a maritime lawyer. I'm a maritime lawyer, and I love swimming, and so every single day I'm doing this environmental campaigning, and then to earn enough money to be able to do it, I do speeches for big companies like, big multinational companies. They say, would you give a speech about leadership or teamwork or courage or these type of things? And I give that, they pay me, and that covers myself and my family and our expenses.
So you are a full-time patron of the oceans, actually.
I love the oceans. I live in the oceans. It's not that I don't like land. I just prefer to be at sea. I love being in the ocean.
We cannot sleep as a dolphins. Yeah, only half
No,
our brain.
absolutely.
We have to go outside from the water sometimes. So Lewis, as I understood, your preparation, your training program is different for each challenge, because of different conditions. Do you have some regular training program which you normally do every week? I don't know. So some volume of swimming. How do you swim just on a regular basis?
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting point, because I've just turned 50, and there's still so many swims which I want to do. I want to be swimming until the last day of my life. And I meet some swimmers who have retired by the time they're 25. So they worked incredibly hard from the ages of sort of 6 to 25. They swam in the Olympic Games, but by 25, they're completely burnt out. So I'm either training for a big swim or I'm not training. And when I'm not training, I love kayaking, I love hiking, I love cycling, I do other sports.
But don't swim?
Just a little bit, maybe once or twice a week. Just enough that I still know what it's like to be.
Don't forget how to do that.
So that I don't forget. I don't have to start right at the beginning. But I do a lot of kayaking. So I live in Cape Town in South Africa, where the sea is, you got the Indian Ocean on the one side, you got the Atlantic Ocean on the other side, and on the other side, you got the Southern Ocean. So 3 oceans meet at Cape Town. And so there's so many great places I can kayak. So at least 4 or 5 times a week, I'm on my own in my kayak out at sea. And kayaking and swimming are complementary sports. They build upper body strength, they build the lungs, they build endurance. And I think that if I were to constantly train year-round, completely, I don't think that I would be able to have the longevity which I'm looking for.
I see. One more thing I wanted to ask. Last week we spoke to Sarah Thomas. You know each other, I guess.
Yes.
And she told me a surprising thing. She told that she doesn't control the distance when she swims the distance swimming, something, I don't know, 100 miles. She doesn't count how many miles she did already and how many is still forward. She just maybe count only how, just check every half an hour the time, or maybe not. What about you? What do you control? What do you check when you swim the long distance?
Then myself and Sarah are completely different. Okay. Yeah. I want to know exactly how fast I'm swimming, how far I've gone, and how far I've still got to go. I'm constantly making those calculations. So remember that Sarah was the first person to swim 4 times across the English Channel.
4 times, yeah.
Incredible. So from England to France, back to England, back to France, back to England. And it's 32 kilometers across the English Channel. So she did 32 kilometers 4 times. I did the first swim along, not across the width of the English Channel, but the length of the English Channel, which is 528 kilometers. It's a long way. And the way I did that was that every day I swam 10 kilometers. And during those swims, I want to know, what speed am I swimming at? Am I in a current? You know, how much further have I got to go? I want this information. I want it real time. So people are writing it up on a board and they're giving me that information. Yeah. And the reason why I want that information live is because I may be in a current. So the English Channel is a very, very strong currents in the English Channel. I want to know whether I'm in a strong current, because if I'm in a strong current and it's behind me and I'm moving forward in a strong current, I don't want to get out. I want to keep moving in that strong current as long and as hard as I can until the current ends. And equally, if the current is against me, I don't want to be swimming. Okay, I want to get out and wait for the current to turn.
Or just move left or right to find the. No, it doesn't work there.
Yeah, you know, the English Channel is some of the strongest tides in the world in the English Channel. Yeah, because you've got all the water from the Atlantic moving up the English Channel in through a narrow, just 32 kilometers, all that water going up and then into the North Sea. And so there's a lot of water moving. Sometimes these currents, you can be swimming fast in one, and then you move 500 meters to the right, and it's going the opposite direction. So you've got to find the right current. Yeah.
So you're like a mathematician. So you try to control everything what's happening with you when you swim. Yeah.
I want to know all the details, and I'm constantly calculating. Now, when I'm doing, 528 kilometers is an enormous swim. It took me 49 days of swimming to go the full length of the English Channel. When I'm doing shorter swims, so for example, when I swam across the North Pole, it's just 1 kilometer.
Yeah.
It's as fast as I can go. Again, I'm wanting to know how much further I've got to go. So I'm very, very different to Sarah, who is able to switch off and then after half an hour put her head up and say, hey, how much further? No.
So you said you feel like you are only one normal person in this world. The rest
No.
But what makes you special? What's your superpower?
I suppose I'm very focused. I've dedicated my life now to trying to be a voice for the world's oceans. I'd say that's the one point. But the second point is I like to be creative. I like to open up a map of the world and start thinking to myself, okay, where can I do a swim? So I'm focused. I want to come up with a really good idea which can get politicians to think. So I hope I'm creative. And lastly, I hope I'm resilient. And what I mean by that is resilience is the ability when things go wrong and you fail to stand up again and bounce back and try again. So, there have been a number of swims which I've attempted, I failed, I went back and tried them a second time. I think that's a really important thing. This last year under COVID, it was incredibly difficult conditions. So I've been involved with negotiations with the Russian government now to try and protect another part of Antarctica. So exactly this time last year, myself and Slava Fetisov had a long meeting with Sergei Ivanov where we were talking about protecting the eastern part of Antarctica. And the two of us had this important meeting. I then returned to South Africa, and then there was a lockdown. And the government then in South Africa wouldn't allow anybody to swim. You couldn't swim in the sea, you couldn't swim in the rivers, you couldn't swim in swimming pools, no swimming because of the COVID regulations. And then my mother got COVID and my mother died. And I watched her die.
Sorry.
And then the negotiations with the Russian government and the Chinese government were not successful. So Russia said that they wouldn't sign the deal to protect this other area of Antarctica. And Slava Fetisov called me up. And I was in a very dark space, incredibly dark. I could see no hope on the horizon. Everything I had worked for to try and protect Antarctica, I'd lost the person I loved the most, my mother. And I wasn't able to swim. I was just sitting at home, and I felt absolutely dreadful. And then Slava called me up and he said, "You know, Lewis," he said, "I was a defense man. Okay, my one responsibility was to protect." He said the world needs more defenders and it needs more protectors. And he said, "Lewis, we're going to stand up, and when the COVID regulations have ended, I want you to come back to Moscow, and we're going to speak to the Russian government again about protecting this beautiful place. But we will not stop until this place is protected." And you know, when I heard these words from Slava, you know, here's somebody that I have so much respect for. He's been through so much in his life. He shone a light at the end of the tunnel. I stood up and I said, right, I now need to get back and keep working again. That's what my mother would have wanted. And that's what the world needs. I need to be back and working. So, you know, you ask me, what are the superpowers? It's creativity, it's focus, but you also have to be really resilient, because you won't win every battle. You will not win every battle. And if you lose a battle, you have to be prepared to stand up and keep fighting.
I see. I'm very sorry about your mother.
Thank you. Yeah.
Could you say a couple of thoughts about your family as well? Do they share your passion?
Yes.
Do they support you, or how?
No, they're very, very supportive. I think that the thing that I was so upsetting about my mother was my mother was 84 years old, and when the war broke out, the Germans were bombing the city in which she lived, Cardiff. And so they sent her, she was an evacuee, all the young children were sent to the countryside. And so as a young girl, as a very, very young girl, she was sent with her little brother, and they were sent away. And this had a really big impact on her. You know, when she got old, the one day she was going to bed in the evening and she fell. And she hurt herself and she couldn't stand up. And she lay on the ground in her bedroom the whole night. Okay? And then the next morning at 9 o'clock, she was able to pull the telephone off the wall, and she telephoned the person next door and said, "Would you please come and help me? I'm on the ground, I can't get up." And the person came running and opened the front door and said to my mother, "Marjorie, how long have you been here?" And she said, "I've been here since 8 o'clock, lying on the ground since 8 o'clock the previous evening." And she said, why did you do that? And she said, "I didn't want to be a bother. I didn't want to burden anybody." And that was that generation who fought in the Second World War. You know, as a young girl, she was always being told, you know, there's a war on. Just keep quiet, do what you do, there's a war on. And so I said to my mother, I said to her, "Mum, I promise you, I will be with you until your last day." And then when COVID occurred, they wouldn't let me be with her for 3 months. They wouldn't let me see her. I wasn't allowed to the hospital, not at all. And then shortly before she died, I was able to go to where she was staying in an old age home, and I could look through the window. And then I put a little speaker through the window. And then I played all the beautiful music that she loved. So that was my mother. My wife is also very, very supportive, and my father was a doctor in the Navy, and he died when I was quite young, but he was also very, very supportive. So they don't push me, they don't stop me, but they encourage me. They support me. They're most incredibly supportive. I don't think I could do this if I had a family who were trying to hold me back. You know, I love the ocean. I feel at home in the ocean. And I hope that I spend the rest of my life in the oceans. And to do that, you need a supportive family.
Yeah, you are a great speaker as well. So your stories are, you know, each one is could be chronized. I think could be you can make a lot of movies from your life, I guess.
You know, the interesting thing about stories is that if you go all the way back to the beginning of time, that's how we connected. It's by telling stories.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's
I
all
don't
about
care.
stories.
You know, if I go to China, if I go to America, Russia, wherever, if you tell stories, that's how you connect. And ultimately, all of us, whether you're in Beijing, St. Petersburg, Cape Town, New York, all of us believe in justice. We want justice. We all want equality. Yeah. I've never met anybody who doesn't want to protect the environment. But it's about showing people how to do that. And I think storytelling is the best way of doing that. Yeah.
Lewis, there are some questions from our audience. Let me read it. So, do you believe that politicians are frank and honest to respond to your environmental call?
That's a really, really good question. What I've learned now from being the United Nations ambassador for oceans is that the leaders of the world, almost all of them, you know, President Trump was an exception. He was somebody who did not believe in protecting the environment, did not care, did not believe in science, respected nothing. He was an exception. Almost every other politician that I have met wants to protect the environment, but often they are facing lots of different issues. The environment is just one issue which they're facing. I mean, you think about what your president is dealing with at the moment. You're dealing with, you know, I don't need to name all the different issues which you're facing in Russia, but there are
a lot.
But there are a lot of issues, and a lot of these are competing, and he has to make decisions. He has to balance things out, and sometimes the environment is not the top of his agenda. And my responsibility as the United Nations ambassador for the oceans is to constantly be a voice, so that, you know, when I meet Russian politicians, to try and make that the biggest issue they're thinking about on their day and make the important decisions. The one thing that I would say about Russian leaders is Russia is so big. You know? Pollution is such it you know, whether we're talking about plastic pollution or climate change or you know, chemicals being put into rivers. The problem with Russia is it's so big that the problems can be diluted over the whole country. You know, if you damage something, so I grew up in two countries. I grew up in Britain and South Africa. If you pollute the main river, the River Thames, everybody's going to know about it because it goes through London. It's a massive river. But if you pollute a small part of Russia up in Siberia, sometimes people don't even know about it, just because the country is just so big, and
That's
pollution
true.
and pollution gets diluted across it. But the interesting thing about Russian people is that, you know, they have a love for wilderness areas. You know, people love to go out into the forests and into the mountains, and so I think that's really important. You know, dealing with some people in other countries who have never ever been into wilderness areas. I deal with some people in South Africa here who live in cities. They've never ever seen a lion. They've never slept out at night and heard a lion roar. You know, or they've never been walking in the field and seen an elephant walk past you. You know, when you walk past an elephant and you hear the noise of the elephant, and the ground reverberates. All you can have is respect, because you look there and you realize, yeah, I am part of this world. I need to respect those things. We need to get people into these wilderness areas, because if our children have not been into wilderness areas, how can we expect them to care for it and make the right decisions? And I think that's the thing about Russia, is that almost everybody in Russia have been out into the wilderness areas because there's so much around you. And I think that's one of the big advantages of dealing with Russian politicians.
It was a strong culture to go outside, especially in Soviet times.
Yes.
Now it's less. But still be a lot of people just remember this. I don't know, this style of living, of just spending vacations, because we were a closed country, and the only possibility to travel was to travel inside the country.
Yeah.
And because of all the sector of hotels and horeca, it wasn't developed in Soviet times, because it's capitalistic things. And the only possibility to Russians to rest is just to go abroad, to go outside, to go to the wilderness, to build areas, and just it was a very strong culture, and even infrastructure. Now it's like so, but it still be. Yeah.
It's so important, you think about being on these phones all day long and texting, or being in front of a computer like this all day long. We need to put the computers down, we need to put the phones down, we need to take our children out into the wilderness areas. They must walk in the forest, they must climb the mountains, they must swim in rivers. That is good for the soul, and it's good for your mind and for mental health as much as it is for physical health. Yeah,
I see. Yeah, mental health is very important as well.
Sure.
Here's a couple of questions. Who created the term speed diplomacy? What is your was it you or media tagged that name calling, or it was a genius marketing move of our beloved Speedo brand?
Yeah, I don't think it was marketing. In fact, I think the first person to talk about that was a Russian journalist who was talking about me swimming down in the Ross Sea and then coming to meet Ivanov and Shoigu and start talking about protecting the environment. For me, it's good for Speedo. Sometimes, it's on the front page of the newspaper, are the Speedo diplomat. But for me, Speedo diplomacy is about us working together. It's about the power of people, ordinary people, to make changes. So, I quite like the term. Yeah.
Okay. One more question is about safety.
Yeah.
Did you probably met a lot of sea animals?
Yes, sure.
Were there some dangerous as well? How do you work with it? How do you manage it?
Yeah. Here's the interesting thing. So in order to talk about that, I need to talk about courage. Courage is a very, very interesting thing, right? So I live in Cape Town, and whenever I go for a swim, I'm swimming in the ocean here, and there are a lot of animals off the coastline. And I'm not talking about soft animals. I'm talking about proper great white sharks, a lot of them. So on the beach where I train every day, I think there's, in the past 10 years, maybe we've had three shark attacks there at the beach.
You? You mean?
No, other people.
General, yeah, I see.
And one of the attacks was very, very visible. So there's a pathway next to this beach. And there was a lady who every single day, her name was Mrs. Webb, every single day Mrs. Webb used to swim along this pathway. And then the one day, so we have lifeguards on the beach, but we also have shark guards. So these are people with binoculars, and they're looking out for sharks. There's a big mountain behind the beach, and so they stand on top of the mountain, and they've got binoculars, and if they see a shark, they make a big noise with a siren, and everybody jumps out the sea. And the one day they saw the shark and they pulled everybody out. And then the next morning, Mrs. Webb went down to go for a swim. And they said, no, don't go. There was a shark seen here yesterday. But Mrs. Webb was an old lady. I think she was in her 80s. And she said, no. I've swum every single day here. I will always swim. And she used to swim backstroke. And so she started swimming backstroke along the side of this bay right next to the pathway. And there were people walking by. And they saw the shark literally come towards her. And they screamed at her, but she swam backstroke, literally into the mouth. It grabbed her, shook her like that, and the only thing that came out was her cap. Dead. Like that. And a lot of people saw this happen. And if you've seen a shark attack, you don't want to go into the water. Now, I didn't see it happen, but everybody talks about that. And there were another 2 shark attacks. And on the beach, there's another beach over there. There have been at least 3 shark attacks. Here's the point. Courage is a muscle. Okay? If you're not exercising that muscle on a regular basis, when you get to my age, I'm just turned 50, you'll get very, very soft. So you have to keep pushing yourself into that danger zone, but you need to be careful. You need to be careful because of the sharks outside there. So when I swim out at sea, I've got a boat next to me, and I do everything I can to make sure that there's as much safety as possible. Mm-hmm. And when I go down and I swim in Antarctica, the level of safety is much more. I'll just grab a photograph here. I went down to Antarctica recently to do this swim down this river.
Mm-hmm. It's only one river in Antarctica, yeah?
No. There are plenty of these rivers in Antarctica, but this one is so big. Uh-huh. And I'll never ever forget this swim because I swam up this river, I swam down, and a little bit further down this river, there is literally a hole, and the water goes straight the way down that hole, straight down to the bottom. It drops around about 100 meters straight, and you will get sucked down it. And these cliffs over here are actually very, very sharp. And so what I decided to do was I decided to swim 250 strokes up the river and then come down with the river 200 strokes. And off I went and started this swim. And I remember going 50, 100, 150, 200, 250. And then I turned around. And I'll never ever forget it because to my right is ice. To my left is ice. Above my head is a blue sky, and I look down this river and it's completely blue. And now I'm so far up the river, I cannot see my team. And waiting for me at the other end is Slava Fetisov. Mm-hmm. And he's got one job. He's got to catch me as I'm coming past. And so he's got a rope. And he's going to throw that across the river. But I'm now in the most remote part of the world. The nearest help is a Russian scientific station, which is about 50 kilometers away. So that's no help at all if you get yourself into trouble. I start swimming back 50, 100, 150. And then you start doubting yourself. Have I miscalculated? And I look up. And on the corner of the river, I see Slava waiting for me with this rope. And as I'm coming past, Slava, through that orange rope, I grab it, he pulls me in and up onto the side. Safety is important, but with safety must come courage. And courage is a muscle, but courage is also contagious. And what I mean by that is that when you surround yourself by courageous people, you yourself can be courageous. And I knew there was no way that Slava was not going to catch me. I trust him 100%. He's not a swimmer, but I know he's going to protect me.
Courage is a muscle. Very good formula.
Yeah.
And it's great to have people who you can believe in.
Yeah.
It's very important. So, Lewis, it was amazing conversation.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you a lot. So I believe it will be inspiring for a lot of swimmers, and will help to provide your message further. And maybe we will try to help to, I don't know, to add our voices to your one.
Thank you.
All together we will change the things. How does it going? So I don't know, maybe you have some questions.
I think the last point I'd like to make, so first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for the questions.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, I come to Russia maybe 3-4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as the coronavirus as soon as I've been inoculated, I will come back to Russia to start the discussions with the Russian government again. Mm-hmm. I've swum in Franz Josef Land. I've swum in Lake Baikal. These are two amazing places.
Yeah.
I remember being in Franz Josef Land and seeing these polar bears, big polar bears, these huge arms and big and fat. And then swimming in Lake Baikal where the water is so fresh. And when you're swimming, if you need a drink, you just...
Yeah, I do it. I just sink for half a meter, not from the, from the top, just half a meter deep and drink that.
It's... I want to come back to Russia and I want to do some swims in Russia with Russians. I can't wait. I look forward
I'd love to meet in person when you come.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
So, Lewis, I just want to wish you to keep your resilience and to keep your voice.
Thank you.
To achieve your very, very honorable goals. Yeah, I believe so. You give us an example that one single person can do big changes, even on government level. It's great to see, and yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck in your great way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye. See you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Watch us on YouTube channel of X Waters.